Hi, welcome to a different type of video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a Boy Pablo song. For this you'll need a couple of things. You'll need a DAW, doesn't matter which one. I'm using Ableton, but I won't be going into any stuff that's like specifically Ableton oriented. Most of what I'm going to tell you about is like universal. You need a guitar. You can make a Boy Pablo song without a guitar. And you need a bass or something to emulate a bass with. There are some pretty good bass plugins. If you have one, great. If you don't have one, you can also downtune your guitar inside your DAW to make it an octave lower, and it'll sound fine. But if you have a bass, that would be great. Real drums, cool too, but let's not get into that yet. Okay, first off, I want to talk a bit about chords, and then we'll get to the production side of things.
Visos, Wanye here. What counts as a Boy Pablo chord? A Boy Pablo chord is basically just a jazzy chord, an extended chord, a chord with some spice. Like for example, a minor 7 chord, a major 7 chord, a diminished chord, a sus chord. There are a bunch of voicings which Boy Pablo uses in his songs. How do you learn to write with those voicings? Well, the best way to do so is by just learning his song. If you learn his songs, and I can recommend a YouTuber named Jens, he has a lot of tutorials. If you do so, you can try to make a song using these chords and emulate the style of this artist. But since you're not exactly copying a song, it'll sound different anyway. As for rhythm and such, I think it's a good idea to check out some old school disco, like Chic, for example, or Earth, Wind and Fire, maybe even Stevie Wonder. But what about the sound? Let's get back to the sound.
Okay, let's look at the production now. First things first, the guitar. Let's listen to the clean single, which is fine, but it lacks brightness. So generally, what you want to add to this is a compressor, maybe a preamp of some kind, and some EQing. First, get some of that mid out and a bit of extra high in, which makes it sound like this. Which is already a little bit better. Then I add an amp, just a tiny bit. Because I play this directly into my audio interface, it sounds a bit fake at first. When you add an amp, which looks like this in Ableton and looks like this inside Logic, eventually when you add all of this together, it sounds like this, which is the crisp, beautiful guitar sound that we're looking for. And the thing that I forgot to mention is that I added an effect which is called a chorus, which looks like this in Ableton and looks something like something else in any other DAW, but it's just known as a chorus. You can use a pedal as well. I added this one because I thought it sounded nice, but for a Boy Pablo song, you're not forced to use it, but he tends to do it like a little bit, a tiny bit, not just like something like this doesn't sound good. You will want to find the little spot where just like it's really funky and crisp. Okay. Next up is the bass. Plugin wise, keep it simple. I shave off a lot of the high end, as you can see. In this case, I shaved off all of it. Use the compressor, bump up the low end like a lot, and then using a graphic equalizer, I shave off like the low end, which is usually called the sub bass. You can't really hear it, the human ears can't really hear it. All it does is like create overtones and stuff, and you don't want that. So the bass part sounds like this. And that with the guitar sounds something like this. For the bass it's important to leave room. So as you can see, I'm having little parts where I'm not playing and parts where we're playing together. To get that funky kind of feel, you gotta do a little waltz between the guitar and the bass. So this is a good foundation for what you're doing. After that you can add a melody. Melodies are very important in Boy Pablo music because it's kind of what carries the whole song. Let's listen to my melody. I started out playing on the guitar and then went over and played it on a synth. So the guitar sounds like this. It's a chorus, it's a delay, it's a reverb. That's like all you need for like the floaty kind of sound. So that's what I used for this one. And then I panned it 12% to the left and added a synth which does exactly the same thing. I used the Dext plugin, which is free. I used Pharaoh, which is kind of like a bell. And it sounds, yeah, I like that sound. So together it sounds like this. And usually in music it's cool to add a tiny bit of left-right stereo building, which I did by panning the guitar to the left and the synth to the right. Together that sounds like this. Which is very groovy already. Then a bit of tambourine. Usually don't put it throughout the whole song, just add it in the choruses for some extra bit of movement. That sounds like this. Just a tiny bit, you know. For the drums, I went ahead and asked someone to play them for me. If you have Logic, I highly suggest using the AI drummer they have, because that one is really good as well, and then pick like disco mode. I decided to go for like the classic disco drum, which is like the which sounds like this. Let's look at the vocals, which I just sent to a chain that I made with like a lot of harmonies, which he tends to do as well, like a low one, a high one, and a normal one, which sounds like this.
You make me feel like I've never been alive before.
It goes through a couple of plugins, which I copied from Reed Stefan for the Ableton users. But I used the OTT, which is a free plugin as well. Let's look at the verses now. The verses have some different things going on, because it's important when making a song to switch things up a little bit. I started out with a Rhodes playing some chords, which sounds like this. Boy Pablo uses keys a lot in his songs, but he keeps them like low in the mix just to make a nice little blanket on the bottom. And then I doubled that with a guitar using a chorus as well. Just simple one stroke. Again, these two do kind of the same thing, so I decided to pan them left and right to get a tiny bit of that stereo feel and give them their own little place. And because these two are very simple, I decided to make the bass extra funky, as you can hear here. And this is possible because the rest isn't doing much. Otherwise, your listeners will get fatigued with all the stuff going on. Once I'm halfway done, that's the point where you think, how can I spice this up a little? In the second half, I add a synth, which sounds like this. So it's getting a little movement, right? It's starting to build up a little. We're getting to the chorus. I add to this by, again, using the tambourine with that, which sounds like this. Like, you know, something is coming, but it's still like calm. Drums, same deal. Let's listen to it. It starts with some rim shots. Very calm. You know, but a good vibe. And then in the second half of the verse, the drum switches from a rim shot to a snare. That's when the rest of the song starts getting some movement too. Eventually, we're about to go to the chorus again. So I added a riser, which is basically just a sound that progressively gets louder. The drums are doing something as well. They're gradually opening the hi-hat, which also has like a swelling kind of effect, which sounds like this.
And I'm
Go.
alright.
So we're back at the chorus again, which stays the same, which also counts for the second verse. Except for one thing, in the last like tiny bit of this verse, I added a muted triangle, which sounds like this. So let's now talk about this. Most of what we just saw is like the same. I decided to add a bridge. In this part,
When will I learn my lesson?
as you can hear, the drum stops. It's just a little choir, a guitar playing the bass part, and a guitar doing a little melody, which are just the previous chords, but I am now finger picking them. What I did here is add a build-up. Let's look at how I did this. As you can see, it's 4 bars. First bar, it's just like my vocal choir and 2 guitars. Second bar, I add the bass. I also added a hi-hat. To give it some movement. Tambourine, tiny bit. Not too loud, just a tiny bit. We're getting somewhere, we're getting somewhere. Here we go. Alright, what you just heard was a little break. Those are fun to do. Generally, Boy Pablo songs have breaks. This is a very simple one. And we're back. This time, chorus again. But instead of the normal chord progression, I did a different one. And in the normal chorus, I play this. Which are just slightly different voicings of the same chords. This is the only thing this part does. It also has a different bass line, which makes sense. To accompany the new chords. Drums is doing the same thing as before, nothing changed. Of course, the tambourine is here. Now let's look at a staple in Boy Pablo music, which is the guitar part. What he does generally is play a melody and then play 16th notes. Isolated, it sounds a bit insane. What he tends to do with this is like a trick that it took a long time for me to find out how he does this, but what he does is he takes a clean signal, which sounds like this. Very boring. Then he adds a reverb, which already helps. It's, I believe, a big reverb. 48% width to give it a lot of space. But that ain't all he does. Because the trick that they do is adding a distortion after the reverb, which is usually a big no-no. Because a distorted reverb sounds kind of chaotic, like you did something wrong. And that sounds like this. Which just follows like a couple of notes inside the chords that I'm playing, which sounds like this. That's that with the bass. We're grooving. At the ending, everything gets a little more dramatic, which is allowed because you've been waiting for it for like 2 whole minutes. I added a bit of synthesizing. As you can see, it's like 2 notes because the chords of the guitar are doing the heavy lifting, which are real strings. Some person played them And I used a lot of plugins to make them sound like crap, like a mellotron. So this is what they sound like. I doubled that with a brass with the same, like I tried to make this sound crappy as well. And what you might hear as well is that it kind of ducks in the whole time. That's because I sidechained it with the kick. This is a trick that I tend to use with my synths. So like when it's a melody, don't do this, it'll sound weird, but when it's just chords, trying to give the whole thing a little more body. If you use a sidechain on the kick, it'll be less overwhelming. Altogether, sounds like this. The big ending, the big reveal, the big party at the end. So that's about it. If you want to listen to this song, it's on my Spotify. You can listen to it if you want. This is the project. I hope I explained everything well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.